Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have with me another very special guest, hailing from Japan at the current moment, but is originally from the British Isles. His name is Sam Stoker. How are you, Sam?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, fine. It's very exciting to be speaking with you. I like to
Yeah, thank
talking
you.
to people who are artists. You're welcome. Uh, I like to know how artists think because, I study art and I'm an art teacher by trade and also an English teacher. And I would like to know more about art and contemporary art, shall we say, because
Hmm.
I was, if we can call it a kind of elitist, shall we say, and I only like the old type of the old masters, shall we say.
Okay.
Uh, but I
You,
grown
you
out
mean
of
like you? Do you mean the European masters or?
yes, essentially, Raphael,
Hmm.
Michelangelo, Caravaggio, even the kind of impressionists like Monet, but a lot of other kind of postmodernists also I like. Um, but can you tell me a little bit about yourself before we start talking about art?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm. Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm from Britain. I'm from near London. I was. Yeah. I stayed in London till I was around 20 years old, and then I moved just slightly out of London to an area called Reading, where I did my undergraduate. uh, which was I think it was quite a good course at the time, but it had lots of kind of teachers there that were kind of interested in kind of expanding painting, and I think that really had a strong influence on me. There was like an artist, the head at the time was an artist called Peter Buckley, who he was not I think he was kind of big at the one time, and he was actually mentioned in like Jasper John's like notes, a book about
Nice.
Jasper John's notes. He's
Wow.
mentioned in that. So and he was definitely kind of this thing about making like not just using paint to make paintings essentially. And there was a few other people. I guess there was a guy. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name's right, but he was from Israel. His name was Amakan Toran, and I don't think he actually come from a art studying background, but he hadn't studied art, but he was making this kind of quite conceptual art that was kind of a bit involved around painting as well. But he was specifically good in understanding something about what you was doing beyond what you did, which was
Uh,
really good.
can you elaborate? What's the name again of the
It was
Israeli artist?
Amakum Toran.
Amikin? Well,
I'm just
I
probably saying
never
it wrong.
heard of that kind of name.
Amakum. Trying not. I think this. I'm not sure if I'm spelling it right actually now, but I can. I think that's wrong. Sorry. Let me try and
Oh,
find it.
oh, oh, no,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the pronunciation, the I Makam, I come,
Okay.
Torin, Torin.
I did spell it a bit wrong,
Yeah.
but let me come back to kind of do that again. Yeah.
Oh, oh, no, no, it's Amikam Torin, which
Yeah.
means
Okay. I'm
my people rise.
oh,
Torin, Torin is a kind of a flagpole in
okay.
Hebrew. Yeah.
Okay.
So my
No,
people rise as a flag torn, a flag pole.
yeah, he was really a great teacher. He was really knowledgeable and really seemed to when you were speaking to him about your work, he always did seem to know what you was talking about, and be able to give you a really good kind of help with what you was thinking about. Like, but yeah, I guess so. So he was a really inspirational teacher when I was studying first. But then after, yeah, I kind of got quite a bit lucky and won painting competition in Amsterdam just as I graduated from my undergraduate. So initially, when I graduated, I went to Amsterdam just for a few months and tried to, like, I had an exhibition and kind of did an art residency, and then I kind of, I don't know what it was, but maybe burnout. I kind of left and went to stay in France for a while, and I was just studying French, and then eventually moved back to London, and I guess London. I was working in like at the Tate Gallery in London, which is quite good,
Yes,
like, but
yes.
just down in the bookshop. But I think that because I was living in London is quite expensive and the salary was quite low, so it was kind of quite difficult to get into my practice at that time. And then I had the chance to move to Scotland to do some community art teaching. And in a way, I think at that point in time, the community art teaching, it just kind of it had this real, what, like, working with people, being inspired by young people, like, kind of gave my artwork more energy again. So in a way, like, I was working with lots of different age groups, but I think especially at that time, working with young kind of elementary school children was actually quite exciting, because they was always full of energy. And I think perhaps had I not done that, I may not have continued to kind of make my own artwork. I think I would have focused probably on the teaching or something. But it was, yeah, that from that point onwards, yeah, I was involved in some quite big kind of community art projects with like the National Theatre of Scotland and other companies. But that kind of helped me to kind of, keep making my artwork. I think I've only made one or two projects during that time that I was, like, really proud of. But it kind of helped me to. It was kind of through being in Scotland that I ended up being interested in Japan somehow again, and then I kind of did a residency in Japan, and then that kind of led me to try to apply for a scholarship in Japan to study on a master's degree, and I was I tried to get it at least twice, and the second time, which was just after the kind of big earthquake here, I applied for it. I got I got the scholarship, and I was able to come to Japan, and it was I guess it was a really interesting experience. It's difficult to say that it was always good, because life's just not like that, is it? So it
Yes,
kind of
yes.
things normalize. So it was quite at times it was quite difficult, but it was a good experience. And during, like, I guess it was a 6 year period I had the scholarship for, I was able to make a lot of work. Yeah, I was, and I kind of, although I come from a painting background, at that time I was making kind of performances and video work and installation work, and it was kind of, it's an interesting time for me to do that. I wouldn't say again. I kind of made quite a deliberate thing of being 34 at the time when I came to Japan. I think it was interesting. I had lots of ideas, and I couldn't really differentiate between the good and the bad. So I just started to do everything that come to mind, which, of course, doing that has some quite embarrassing moments as well as some positive moments. But I think it kind of helped me to kind of, I guess, clear some of the rubbish out of the way, and kind of focus more in on my kind of my other work. But then when I finished, I guess architecture is something that's always been running through my work from the kind of start. When I say the start, I mean from when I was about 18 years old,
Mm.
uh, and then I kind of tried to get into working with an architectural firm, but it didn't really work out. And then I was fortunate to get a teaching job. So in a way, it's, I mean, in the last kind of 2.5 years, really, it's been that this kind of teaching job has helped me to kind of, stabilize things, and also just kind of start considering my artwork again. Although I think at the moment I'm making stuff, and it's more to do with, like, thinking about what I'm making, and not necessarily to do with conceptual things. It's more just kind of formal things, I think. Which I think ultimately at some point I want to change that. But if I don't, because when you're, I guess, if you're teaching, that when you start teaching at first, it's quite difficult. You get quite flustered by the volume of teaching you need to do. So to find the time to really do the research I want and so on has been difficult. But I still think that making it's important to keep your kind of hand in making stuff, even if it's not necessarily really deep conceptually or something. And but yeah, but ultimately at some point I wanted to kind of develop it again a bit more conceptually. But at the moment I'm more in a phase of an ongoing phase of drawing, painting. Sometimes it's digital painting, but and I guess at the moment I'm working on quite a big. It's like a 180 centimeter kind of square. Do you, do you use centimeters in Israel or?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
The
okay,
metric system, yeah.
yeah. So it's 180 meters square, which is I guess
Well,
it's the same size as a tatami mat, which is or two tatami mats, which in Japan is the kind of flooring system that
yes,
they use.
yes.
They often use it for actually building the size or a room. If you go to see a room in an apartment, they will say it's like 3 or 4.5 or
Mm,
6
yeah.
tatami mats or something like that. And I quite it's kind of it's around the I quite like it because it's quite an easy relationship, but body size to like how your body fits on the mat when you're like laying down. It's kind of 180 centimeters and so on. Or sitting down and it's half the tatami mat. And I quite like those kind of relationships. So I kind of stuck with that when I was doing when I started making these bigger paintings.
Mm,
But I guess also I have been making some collaborations with the students at work recently, which I think it's been enjoyable. I think I want to make more of that in the future. But it's just kind of starting. Starting is important. Getting momentum is important to me. So yeah, but I've been here in Japan for like 9 years now. So
mm.
which has been interesting. It's been interesting. And we just had the Olympics, which I'm not so interested in, but it seems to been quite fun for some people.
Yeah, yeah. We got a kind of medal, the golden medal for Israel for gymnastics, or I don't know what's the actual term. Maybe the artistic gymnastics. I don't
Okay,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Something
Is
like
it on the
this.
map?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it on the map? Yeah,
It's
I
on the
think that.
map.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's called artistic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I don't know if it's the proper name of it. I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. It's also a kind of an art, um,
Yeah.
which is a kind of maybe. Well, I don't want to get into it because there is no kind of theory to to prove that that kind of art came from that culture. When I say that
Yeah.
culture, I mean the Mycenaean, shall we say, culture. But but it's plausible, that the ancient Mycenaean culture invented that kind of sport, and
Yes.
also other kinds of very gruesome types of sports.
Definitely.
So I want to know, uh, have you always wanted to become an artist?
But since I was a child,
Mm,
I think that I've always had like my grandfather and my mum, they used to like painting. They weren't. I wouldn't say they were artists, but they used to like painting. So I was kind of painting often as well. I guess in school, for instance, I wasn't doing so well in school, but in any area apart from art. But I didn't really think that I was even interested in being like trying to be a professional artist until I was about 17. Which I went to college, and it was after doing quite badly at school. Actually, I kind of went to college, and I found that from that point onwards I was doing well, and like having these different projects. And I guess that we had to research different ideas, and it was, although there was quite a lot of instruction for kind of methods and stuff, we did get the opportunity quite soon to start making our own work. And once and I guess because that college is quite close to London, and the art scene in London is pretty good. So you can I was able to get into London, see quite lots of galleries and lots of different artists, contemporary artists as well, not just well, a mixture of contemporary artists and kind of traditional work, which was obviously necessary. And I think at that time there was quite a push as well in like the British kind of culture toward for artists. Like it was kind of there was I think it was called Cool Britain or something like that, which is a kind of a catchphrase, but it was definitely that government at the time was supporting art quite well. I think it's changed quite a lot now, but at that time there was a definite energy for yeah creating work, so or creating artwork.
Yeah, you had all that kind of maybe maybe the punk rock scene was fading a little bit, but you had
Yeah, yeah,
the
so it was like I guess we had in the 1980s it was the post-punk movement, but then at the beginning of the 90s there was the group of artists called the YBAs, the Young British Artists, which involved
mhm.
people like Damien Hirst and
Yeah,
Tracy
yeah,
Emin,
yeah, yeah.
so on, and that was I was after them, but they were having they'd kind of progressed from having kind of small exhibitions set up by themselves and having really big exhibitions at the time that I studied. So they were, I guess they were the. I wouldn't say in particular there was any of those artists that really inspired me at that time, but I was more interested in kind of other, probably more established European artists like Anselm Kiefer. I'm not sure if
Yes,
you know.
yes,
Yeah,
I know him. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think my earliest, yeah, I guess my first project that I did was heavily kind of influenced by him, and I think he kind of is one of those figures that even though I don't follow him all the time, he kind of keeps on interesting me. I guess he's just such
Yeah, he
a
also
prolific.
has those kinds of giant plates that he does. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and he also has that kind of farmland that he's. It's not farm. I think it's farmland in Barjac, in France. He's like his studio, and it's almost like a whole village of his artwork, where in
Hmm.
kind of factories and on the land. So it's very. I mean, he made lots of money from selling huge paintings at the early in the
Yes.
1980s, I think. So it's kind of he's used his money back into his art, and you can see that he's got quite a lot of money. But, uh, but yeah, he was really inspirational at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so what was the kind of first artwork, painting, sculpture that you saw that really kind of influenced you or kind of informed you about the nature of art?
Wow. I think I can't say that it was definitely one. I think that it was. I mean, if I think about it now, the first one was probably Mark Rothko,
Hmm.
because he had the room at the Tate Gallery, and it was one of those things where, like, if you see Mark Rothko's work in a book, it's not particularly stunning or something. It's too small really to appreciate. But when you see it, and you're like they have the what is known as the Seagram murals in London. It's like the Mark Rothko room, and it's just this particular type of a kind of red and dark painting, almost like an installation. And I remember going to see that, and on the like when I was going to see it, I was completely switched off to it. But then, kind of going into the room, spending some time with the work, it had a very different effect. Yeah, I can't remember. It's difficult to say whether it was an emotional effect at that time, but I've been there several times, and since that first time, and yeah, found the experience maybe different each time I go to see it. But also, I remember there was a Paul Cézanne exhibition at the same time, and I hadn't heard of Cézanne even at that time, so that was like a retrospective of his work. So there was, to see, I guess, Cézanne's painting and Mark Rothko's painting, and I think they were almost next door to each other as well. They're kind of different, in my memory anyway. It might be wrong, but that was a really good,
Yeah,
like strong.
that will be cool to like to try to conjoin them together to one room,
Yeah,
to have one that is Cézanne Rothko kind of,
yeah,
to do a kind of I don't know, kind of a um, kind of like the Pantheon has all those kinds of windows, in Rome, has on
Yes,
the ceiling, so it will look like that. Maybe it's uneven
yes.
kind of windows. So, so when did you first create your first artwork for real, shall we say? Yeah.
Robert, can I show you something? Can I show you on
Yes,
the
of
screen? 'Cause
course.
yeah,
Would
yeah,
love it.
yeah. I think that. Um, Let me try and do this. I have to make the screen a bit bigger. Uh, Sorry for doing this. Oops, it's gone to the opposite end.
Mm.
And I can't change the picture. So sorry, it's going to go flashing through for a second. I don't know why it stopped right at the end. Uh, Sorry for this.
Like the Ludovico method in Clockwork Orange.
Yes. But it stopped again. It's going to do it
Uh,
again. I know. No, it did it again. Uh, how do I do? Sorry for this. Just I'm doing it twice.
oh, it's
So
fine.
I guess if anyone wants to see my artwork, they can just slow it down for a minute,
Yes.
and then I'll try to slow down enough as it gets towards. Yeah, here. So I guess this is when I think this was around 1997,
Mm,
and I think I don't know if it's obvious, but I guess I was looking at Jackson Pollock and some of Anselm Kiefer's paintings. Actually, the image is much more pixelated than I remembered, but so
mm.
sorry for that.
Oh, it's
But
fine.
it was basically I guess it was like one of the things I found I struggled with once the teachers had stopped giving me kind of briefs to work with was what to make artwork about,
Mm,
and I kind of it was I guess it was unfortunate for in a way my grandfather died around that time and I was really
mm,
close to him like growing up,
yeah.
so I kind of ended up going into the empty house and using like I guess inspired by like Anselm Kiefer's kind of going around and collecting kind of using materials that are kind of relevant to his subject matter.
Mm,
So I was using in my grandfather's house materials that were relevant to him and his life, or even things like the free newspapers that at that time kept on coming through the door. I think it doesn't happen quite as much now,
mm,
but at that time you used to get lots of local free newspapers coming through the door. So there was piles of newspaper. Uh, there was lots of kind of materials, even using dust and stuff that was building up in the house when it was empty, and kind of using the kind of the arrangements of his uh, the sorry the architectural size of his house. This was kind of the actual a door frame and a window, and the door frame was the actual
mm.
size of the door frame. So it was quite a big painting. I can't remember the exact size
Wow.
actually,
Yeah.
um, but also I was using kind of some silkscreen prints of images of him. I think you can see one in the top left hand corner, just,
Mm,
and then whenever it's got that kind of square, it's like a kind of silkscreen print of him. Uh, but so yeah, one of the things I did was this painting. Another thing, which I think was the most emotive thing, was to kind of make a kind of model of him. I'd been cutting his grass at the time before when he was like ill, and then I kind of used his clothes and the grass cuttings to make this figure.
yeah.
Which in the top photograph, what I did, there's quite a lot of photographs. I kind of made a book of it, where I was just placing the figure around the house in places I remembered him being, and then
Mm,
eventually I kind of cremated it in the back
yeah.
garden,
They burned
which
an effigy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I terrified the neighbors. They really didn't like it.
No, no. Yeah. Yeah.
They,
It was good
yeah,
that you weren't in America, for
yeah,
example, because especially.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But no, it was. I think it was kind of because I guess because it was one of those projects which had a lot of meaning to me, but I think that the meaning was very, very personalized. It was very difficult to kind of, and I kind of, this is retrospectively, of course, but I couldn't really relate it. I think it's difficult for other people to relate it to it, other than it being like a story about my grandfather dying, and then they can
mm,
recognize that.
mm,
But a lot of the symbolism is very personal. So it's difficult. I think it would be difficult for other people to read the meanings that I read. Probably my family could read some of the meanings, but not necessarily other people. So I guess to some extent it was the first body of artwork that I made, and I kind of continued it with different works over the kind of, I guess, the following year or so. But this, I think, was the strongest work out of that. Um, but yeah, I guess in a way this didn't really have a title either. It just kind of was an ongoing kind of project using different things, eventually, I guess, I ran out of objects, and then I had to find something else to make artwork about.
Yes.
But but it was, yeah, I guess that was for me, that was the kind of main starting point of making things that had some meaning to me,
Mm,
or me feeling like I was able to make artwork.
mm.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah, if you want to stop sharing, if you don't want it,
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned that you wanted to get into the fields of architecture. You
Yes.
wanted to become an architect. So when did that kind of first thought spark in your head?
Well, I think it was actually in that first painting that I showed you there, where I was kind of using architecture as
Mm,
having meaning, because I guess yeah, going into my grandfather's kind of empty house, I guess not, in a way architecture had never had such a profound meaning on me at that time. It's, we have different experiences, but from that point on, I think I was always looking at architecture as almost like a starting point. Um, I can't remember what is the next. 1 second, I just want to check something. Uh, yeah, I guess I'm gonna. Sorry, I need to come back to the
mm,
screen, but I can show you that the next artwork was this was when I was at my graduation, and I was kind of using, rather than using personal references, I was using kind of art objects and the size of things I was finding or buying from the local community
mm,
where I was studying. So it was kind of window sizes combined together with kind of bed sheets that I bought from kind of charity shops and stuff. It was actually a bit. I don't have any other images at the moment, but it was a much bigger
and
installation
it
than that.
was stuffed with different material, or was it empty?
No, it was empty. Yeah, it was kind of. I kind of painted it so it was kind of laid on the floor, and
Mm,
I painted it with resin, so it kind of held the
mm,
shape.
yeah,
So it's kind of solid. So it looked a bit like it's caught in the wind or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it was more. But it was definitely. I was definitely thinking architecture, even if it wasn't necessarily completely looking like architecture. It was on an architectural scale, and that was. Yeah, that was a definite. Again, I guess there's no way of, when you're graduating from your undergraduate course, most people work on a kind of significant project anyway, don't they? For them, at least. So that was kind of at this point, I was definitely interested in architecture. I didn't really imagine that I would go into architecture at any point, but that kind of ended up happening more recently than then. But that was like, I think I was actually looking as well, because I'd studied some graphic design as well, so I was certainly looking at things, the way things laid out in space and were aligned together, and yeah, working with grids, even though this grid was actually a kind of I guess an informal grid. It wasn't like a standardized grid. It wasn't but there was a grid structure to this installation, and it was
Mm,
based around this kind of 180. No, this wasn't 180. Sorry, I'm saying that, but it's not. It was well before I was interested in Japan. It was just, I think it's just a similar scale.
mm.
Um, yeah, but yeah,
So
the architecture.
yeah, so where was it exhibited, shown?
So that this was exhibited in the University of Reading, but then it was also exhibited in a gallery
Mm,
in East London. What gallery was that? I can't remember the name of the gallery, but it was in Mile End in East London, and it was related, an exhibition that was related to the university, but it was shown in two places. I
mm,
think that when it was shown at when it was shown at the university, I had a whole room to myself, and I was able to really organize the space exactly as I wanted, even kind of restricting the access into the room, so
Mm.
people had to kind of bow down, not bow down, kneel down almost to get into the
Wow.
bow down
Yeah.
too much, kneel down to
Yeah.
get into the room. So
Almost like
it
a
was kind of,
church. Yeah.
well, yeah, no, I didn't want it to. It was. Some people said it had a spiritual feeling, but I didn't want people to bow down. That was a bad choice of words. It wasn't a Freudian slip. I didn't want that. It was
Yeah.
just, yeah, people had to, but it was just, yeah. So it was almost like a secret place. But also, if I in restricting the doorways, it meant that there was quite a dramatic change of scale once you entered the room,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
when you went when you, this kind of sculpture basically covered the doorway, so you didn't really have a sense of the size of the room. But as you entered, it kind of opened out behind the sculpture. It was quite a big room,
Yeah. Yeah.
but so it was like playing with space in that way, and
Yeah.
I guess uh, involving the space into the yeah
Yeah.
into the structure
Yeah.
of the artwork as
Incorporating,
well.
yeah, the
Yeah,
physical space into the,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I can stop that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, you want to, if you want to see more, I can actually show. Yeah, I can, because I've not gone for everything that I've ever done because
No,
it's
I
too
just
much.
wanted to talk about architecture a little bit with you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's carry on with this then, because it just makes sense
Yeah.
to show this as well.
Yes.
Actually, this
That's
is
exactly what I wanted you to show, actually. Yeah. What I
okay.
had in mind.
Okay, okay, good. So yeah, this one I was actually this is the second project that I did. I did two residencies in Japan when I lived in Scotland, and actually the first one was more related to finding local materials, but this one was kind of I don't really know if the concept was very strong, but I was basically taking the scale of a Glasgow, a typical Glaswegian or Scottish apartment, known as a tenement apartment, and making a kind of representation of that in Japan using just only Japanese materials. So in a way, I was able to collect, because you know, the bamboo grows not everywhere, but in places just like grass. You know, it's not it's a kind of very solid material to work with, but it can grow quite freely in different places. You don't get it everywhere, but when you do get it, there's usually quite a lot of it. But there was a garden, a kind of local kind of farmer's garden to this sorry, this park, and I was able to kind of collect. I think it was up to about 150 different bits of bamboo without that affecting his garden at all. He still had lots of bamboo, but I basically drew the floor plan to the apartment on the floor, and then kind of stuck the bamboo at intervals around. So to some extent, what I wanted it to have, you know, when you're looking at it this way, it kind of, I don't think I've got the other picture, but it kind of looks like just almost like a bamboo forest or something.
Yeah.
But when you step inside of it, it clearly, like, the space is clearly defined, and
Yeah.
it kind of, it was a comment I got by one of the local kind of art people. She said it was like when you're inside, even though you can see out of it, you feel like you're inside because the space is kind of so defined by the bamboo, and that was kind of what I wanted. This kind of, I guess, a slightly ephemeral effect of kind of being inside whilst being outside. And that was, I think that was the main thing I wanted, was I do have a bit of a tendency, or especially at that time, to kind of have some personal reasons for starting a project, but I think that more and more as I'm I don't really need to go into every one of them. It's not that interesting. So uh, but I think if it starts with the personal thing, there's a way of kind of, you know, you take it beyond yourself. You don't just necessarily. I didn't want to stick with this like completely personal symbolism. So instead of using, although I used a Glasgow tenement flat, what I was using that had some relevance to me, it still had a kind of, that actual style of apartment has a social historic relevance to the city. So, you know, it was kind of, the starting point was me, but I wanted to move it away from being just about my experience or something, and then to kind of put it into a more shared experience with other people.
Yeah, yeah. I also saw the kind of James Answer kind of masks that for a brief second.
The masks, or
Yes,
was it on this PowerPoint presentation, or was it?
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
If you,
Maybe it was on the. Oh, I know what's happened here. Sorry, 1 second. I might have to stop the share for a second.
yeah, okay.
Do you mean this one?
Yes.
Okay, I can try and click on that. This is basically about my community art project, so
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's taking a
Okay.
little while to load up. But yeah, it wasn't. I kind of did a lot of different things. Some of it was kind of mural painting, some of it was sculpture, some of it was filmmaking. But these masks, for instance, they ended up being like actually. I was interested in Japan at the time, but they ended up being the children's version of crash test dummy masks.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Wow.
because
Ah, yeah,
we had
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Cool. Yeah, I see the kind of marks,
yeah,
the crash test marks, the logos.
because
So,
we did the project that we did ended up being held. It was like a kind of a local kind of community project, but it ended up being held in a like a mechanics kind of building,
mhm.
and they were engaging young children in kind of just kind of trying to train them basically. If they would shoot like people basically that weren't going to school, they could go and kind of learn how to fix cars. So we ended up using we worked in several schools in the area, but then we brought all of the artwork to this kind of mechanics place and did this kind of live performance. I think there was other things we made, include kind of short films and so on.
Mm,
But it was kind
cool.
of yeah, yeah. That was it was. I think again, I guess conceptually, I'm not sure about the project, but working with that, like I think we worked with nearly 200 children or something, and that was a lot
Mm.
of fun,
Oh,
and adults as well. Uh, there's Mario as well. But there's
yes.
yeah, again, there's not here. I've not got all the projects that I work on. It's kind of impossible to show all of them in a way. But some of them, yeah, I guess they all wait with these projects. Most of them, for instance, this one was about cleaning your teeth. You can see it says keeping them nice, and the visit and like the children are making their own kind of models, and we built a kind of very small kind of theatre set to take the photographs. But it was a lot of the community projects I did were definitely had a theme, or someone that was funding the project wanted a certain type of project, and for this one it was the local kind of health service trying to promote the children to brush their teeth more regularly. So some of them maybe not so wouldn't say experimental, but still
Mm,
try to approach them from an experimental way as much as possible.
yes.
I'll
Mm,
stop that sharing then. Yeah.
yeah. So you also teach art. Uh, we
Yeah.
all we mentioned it, or you mentioned it, um, and I think. What do you think of, do you get inspired by some of your students' kind of projects when you ask them and you see the final projects? Do you try to steal something from them, or
Yeah, no,
or
I think it's not stealing something from them, but certainly,
being inspired, not stealing, of
yeah,
course?
certainly some inspiration. Yeah, I don't think I would ever steal anything in particular they did, but sort of if you see some students working in a certain way, it does give you, yeah, it can give you some inspiration to kind of doing stuff. I don't, I think that that's part of the, I think I mentioned to you before that when start working with the elementary school children, it was really inspirational and it probably kept me in making artwork. But when I'm working with more, I guess more adult students, there, it's I think the ones that are ambitious, the ones that are really involved or engaged in what they're doing, are the ones that are inspiring. You know, when you can't, when you're yourself as working quite kind of, full time, and you're struggling for hours to find time to do things, and then there's somebody that, the students have a quite busy schedule as well, and you can see that they've been there overnight or something in the art room making their artwork. That can be quite inspirational, I think, to see when they really take something on. um, I always have found that is inspirational, and I work. I've got like a full-time job, but a teaching job, but I also teach in another area part-time, where the kind of, even though it's part-time, the students there are kind of a mix between like high school leavers to PhD people that want to do a PhD in a foreign country. It's quite a range of different kind of people, and I think because they 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 have been quite inspirational at times. But again, it's more an energy thing, I think, than actually. I feel like I should apply that kind of energy to something that I'm doing if I want to take it somewhere. I don't feel that if I, some like I've recently been working on a painting, and it's taken me, because I've had little time to work on it. It's taken me months and months, but uh, I keep on feeling, I need to keep on doing more, and I feel like I need to be in the studio more, doing the work, and force myself to do it, because sometimes if you finish work, kind of you just don't feel like kind of doing more work, but when you see the students doing it and pushing their own ideas, yeah, I guess that. It definitely is when somebody is involved and engaged in their project, when it really looks like they're investigating an idea. At that time, it's going to be really inspiring, and I think that it's not like a matter of stealing. I've not for me. It's just looking at the way that they're working, the volume of output that they have, and thinking, because really their projects don't really have anything to do with the interests that I have. That kind of, they're working in their own things. They're mostly, 20 years younger than me, so they are definitely interested in different things from me. But it is that engagement, watching them be engaged, that's inspiring.
Mm.
I think I haven't really. I've been quite lucky, actually. I haven't really seen in my life people like a professor stealing the students' ideas.
Mm.
I've seen it like in artwork. There's like a few kind of famous cases where people have blatantly stolen their students' work. But yeah, I haven't come into contact with that, fortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How about
not
you?
steal. Yeah, me.
Okay.
Have I
Yeah.
stolen something?
No.
Yeah, I
Yeah. Yeah.
stolen a lot of things, but when I steal, I try to steal not from the students. I try to steal from the kind of old masters, or from
Yeah.
people or contemporary artists who are inspirational to me, and I like their form, and I want to
Mm.
copy that form, and then I want to, produce it in my own style. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not stealing. It doesn't
No,
fall
I
under
agree.
the category of stealing, shall we say, or plagiarism.
I agree. It's not stealing, and it's not copying. It's kind of using the
Yes.
information that's out there to find your own ground. Because it's like, I said, uh, we do share a kind of common, even if we speak different languages, there's a common visual language that applies. I think it
Yes.
does a change across cultures, but and there is kind of linking things across cultures as well. But you do. When I said I like to find, I often find something like start with a personal starting point, but then in order to kind of make
Yes.
connections, you need to see what other people are doing and find those artists that are maybe working interested in a similar field. For instance, I mentioned, I showed the project about grief. Like, if I didn't look at other artists that were kind of working and using the artistic process as some kind of cathartic, or
Yes.
grieving thing, I wouldn't have had. I would probably. I'm not sure what I would have done, but I did. you do need, I think you do need to find your interest and then to explore that in and how other people have explored it in order to make something kind of more, um, I guess it just makes it, it's still you, and it engages with them, and it's not, I don't think it's stealing. There's some
Yeah,
cases when it
no,
really 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 looks like stealing, but
yes,
I
yes,
think
there are,
it just
there
mean, I
are.
think it's a bit mean, but I think it means if it looks like stealing, it just means someone hasn't really worked hard enough. So, uh,
Yes.
or but then there's some. I think there's sometimes as well, like you mentioned Caravaggio. Like I would love to be able to paint in that way if I
We
had the
all would,
patience.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things. But the effect of, if you wanted to have a certain effect, if you wanted to communicate a certain period of time, a
Yes.
certain type of chiaroscuro or whatever, it would be, to use that artist as like you can. What's I've forgotten the word. Appropriate that artist for that purpose. I think that's, of
Yes.
course, I've seen some people do that very well at
Yes.
times, not necessarily Caravaggio, but other techniques.
Yeah. Well, look, there are kind of artists like Diego Velázquez who can paint a picture in 45 minutes and say, I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah,
And there are people like Caravaggio who will take like 8 months to do one painting at least because
yeah,
he's lazy. So they're lazy and also kind of it doesn't want to work specifically. He doesn't see himself as an artist. And he saw
yeah,
himself
yeah,
that as a kind of a free spirit, which is an understatement. um, but he was a great character, and he happened to be one of the greatest artists that ever lived by chance. I don't think that he wanted to be an artist. I think he wanted to be free from the manacles, shall we say, that ground him
yeah,
into this earth and the manacles of the Catholic Church. Um, but now this gets to the kind of meat of the conversation when we talk about art as a universal language and art as
yeah,
a tool. But I want to
yes,
get into the kind of supernatural kind of elements of art. That
yes.
some artworks seem to be a work of magic, you know?
Okay.
What is the kind of a transformational properties that art has, and what is the function of art in society and humanity?
What is the function of? I guess. I mean, if we're teaching, thinking about it to different cultures, it obviously, in the past, it was until, I guess it's until almost Renaissance, it was usually based or related to something religious or spiritual to people's
Mm,
lives, but it was like
yes,
this, the visual or symbolic, the visual part of that, wasn't it? So in that point in time, uh, it was, yeah. There's definitely a, I can't really say that there's definitely definitely a spiritual connection, because there's often the spiritual connection is to that community specifically, and other people that are not from that community kind of struggle to
yes,
see the symbolism, so, or even appreciate the symbolism. But I think in terms of kind of things like contemporary art, I guess it's this, the spiritual for me is in the, when something is moving to you. And it doesn't necessarily, it can be in a number of different ways, and I think it's not just through painting, it can be for all kind of forms of art, like performance, music, whatever.
yeah,
Music is often more directly emotionally affecting, isn't it? But it does, well, I think that I think that period of time when you spend looking at art for a period of time and it really gets into you, you kind of walk away from it. Well, you can't walk away from it easily. It kind of keeps with you. It keeps in your mind. It keeps in your body. I can think of some experiences I've had with that. Um, but it's usually installation work that kind of gets me like that. There are some paintings, as I mentioned, Caravaggio, that I had that feeling with, and Mark Rothko, where the painting kind of lasts with me. But when there's a lot of installation work that can really kind of creep up on you, and in different ways. and I wouldn't necessarily it's always spiritual, but I guess there's an artist called Mike Nelson, and he's a British artist. When I was a long while ago, he was much more influential to me than he is now. But he used to make these environments within the gallery space, which looked like the real world, like like a real environment within the gallery space. So you'd kind of go into the gallery, and then you'd enter a room, and it'd be like an office, and you wasn't sure if it was an office in the gallery or an office in the and in the next room there'd be like a nightclub or something like that, and it would be
Wow,
this
cool.
this constant game of changing rooms, like a
Yeah,
labyrinth.
yeah, I like it.
And that,
I like it.
yeah, no, that experience was definitely a moving experience. So and it wasn't like Funland, it wasn't like the
Yes,
going to the
yes,
circus
yes.
or something. It was much more powerful than that. And but he would also, even though he was creating whole rooms, I've heard him talk a few times about his work, and he would play special attention to the details of those spaces. So maybe there's lots of things going on unnoticed that would also affect you. Just the presence of them in the room. You wouldn't necessarily have to see all of them for it to be so powerful, but it was definitely those kind of experiences. And I guess if what does what if we say what does art provide in our society, I think it it often provides an experience that's outside of um, the normal structures of things. Like uh, if you go to see a musical, for instance, the musicals often have a very specific structure. There's all like certain
Yes.
members of the
Like a
family that need to
story.
be.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You,
yeah.
you know, you need to have the certain characteristics, but I think art has a place for expression outside of those certain characteristics. I wouldn't say everybody does this successfully, but I think that when it's done really well, it's not because it fits. Yeah, it doesn't have to fit inside these kind of certain criteria in order to qualify as
Yeah,
being
yeah.
art. So it's kind of. And I think it's good to have a space that we're allowed to do that as both as artists, but also allowed to see that as audience, um, because if
Yes.
otherwise everything is too packed up neatly, and we need
Yeah.
a space for things to fall apart a little bit,
Yes.
I guess, or
Yes,
to be
we need
different.
a kind of a wacky races, shall we say, that exists
Yeah, yeah,
on a different plane. Yeah,
yes, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, somebody I know, or I've met him before, but I'm not sure, I don't know if he wants to be quoted as saying it, but he's a kind of had a kind of critique and art teacher,
Mm.
maybe philosopher, but his name's Jan Verwert. He's a German kind of Jan Verwert,
Yeah, yeah,
but he,
thank you.
he said, yeah, but he said that his description of a certain, like the kind of a best example of an artist that's fully engaged in their practice, fully engaged in their idea development, challenging themselves all the time, and trying to break new ground, was Jim Henson. I don't know if remember Jim Henson. He was the Muppets, the guy that made the Muppets, or
Ah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
remember now that name, yeah.
yeah, so he was, and he made all these different films with different characters,
Yes, yes.
different songs. Even he was really involved, and in
Elmo,
different
Elmo, yeah.
shows.
My
Yeah,
favorite
yeah. Even like,
character, yeah.
but even like little things, like TV programs that were specifically aimed at children, TV shows specifically aimed at adults, things that are kind of involving children and adults, kind of humor all the time,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
intertwined. But yeah, he said that was a really good example of an artist fully exploring and investigating their kind of field. So, and he would, Jan de Voort said that he called it Muppetness, which is kind of not really a
Puppetness.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he said,
Sounds like a emotional condition or something like it.
yes,
Like mopiness or moppetness.
yeah, yeah, it does. No, but I think that idea that art can be anything. It's not everything. It can be made from anything, but it usually means that the
Yeah.
person involved in making it has fully explored something. And I think that
Yes.
that's I really like that idea. And I think that one, if you think about art like that, then a lot more a lot more people's artwork becomes more acceptable as art. If you get what I mean, you can get like even someone, I don't know if you know Piero Manzoni, who made the can of artist shit. He made these own, into a can, and like if you look at an artist like him, he was
Yes.
fully exploring
Yes.
this kind of almost radical
Uh,
uh, non-art idea, and he's always enjoying himself. He's like
yes.
most of the photographs of him. I think he died quite young, but he's always
Yeah.
enjoying this kind of playfulness, and I think even that would fall into the idea of Muppetness somehow, because obviously Jim Henson is mostly, I think maybe not throughout his whole life, but there's quite a lot of joy in Jim Henson's work, and I think that even if somebody's making quite miserable work, you can see that there's some joy in what they're doing through the how well they engage with what they've done,
Yeah, a guy
or how
like
far
that
they,
sorry?
or just how far they've gone with an idea. That it's
Yeah.
not just something they did at the last minute for just to get the grade in or something like that. It's something they're really working on constantly. They can't really leave alone.
Yes. Another guy like that is Walt Disney.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah. His
yeah,
company almost went under several times, but he convinced his brother to invest more money, more funding into the company, try to convince him that the next one will be the big money bringer, shall we say. And he certainly made it, shall we say.
yeah,
Also,
yeah.
Mary Poppins subsequently was one of the kind of major factors in the fact that Walt Disney even exists till this day. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's that. I think it is actually. I mean, even you can see people like Jim Henson or Walt Disney. They're very commercial in a way, but I think the way that they approach things, the kind of environment in which they entered and explored things, it should be inspirational in a way. I quite like I'm at times I think I tend to follow things that are quite serious subject matters. But if I don't look at things like Walt Disney or Jim Henson, then I'm really, it's really difficult for me to
yes, yes.
I can
To go through the
make
day.
myself really miserable. Yeah, and I don't want to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, I have one final question, which
Okay.
is I think it's maybe a kind of a deep philosophical question. I like to think of myself as a deep and philosophical. But what is the kind of role of the artist in society? What does an artist try to achieve? Is there a kind of do we want to elevate human consciousness to its highest potential,
Hmm.
or sorry, do we want to express ourselves with no kind of boundaries, with no rules, but just to express ourselves in different kinds of media? Is there a higher purpose to art, or the artist's role, or is it a selfish endeavor, shall we say?
I think because I think that people who make art require different things from what they're doing, and I think that there is art that's very meaningful to like large portions of the community, or like large portions of, yeah, around the world. Whatever, there's very rarely one artist that has meaning to all cultures.
Yes.
It does happen, but I think within a culture, maybe even with this socially engaged practice and so on that's happening, often that can be often that can really it can be involved with a community and really have meaning for that community, but not necessarily have meaning outside of it. But I think that affecting small numbers of people is important as well, because
Mm.
that has a kind of knock-on effect. I don't. So I think that I think as well, even if an artist is making kind of something very personal, they may just affect one or two people. They may just it might just be a kind of a very localized effect they have on people, but that meaning is still kind of important. And I think I go back to that thing. I don't know about ideally the role of artist, and I wouldn't like to say there's a complete ideal, because there's so many different variations on what an artist can be. If we think about it as just creative people, there's commercial end, there's like musical end, and when music is and commercial is often also split into very different categories. But for instance, some music is just there for you to dance to, some music is just there for you to listen to. But the act of dancing is quite effective. It's a if you go dancing at the weekend and you're dancing all night, it gives you a good feeling for the rest of the week. That's definitely something that's important to the community. It's kind of people releasing some energy. But I do also think that art, because art is I wouldn't say it is always, because you know uh, video games and films are quite often quite high paced, but art does often give people a kind of contemplative moment, a moment to kind of sit down, think, and stay with something for a while. And I think that that's a problem we have in society. Is everything is just so quick. It's only like we the rate of uh, the rate at which we're kind of fed images or fed information now is probably
Yes.
quicker than ever before. But we do need moments where we're not rushing, I think. And I think that for the artists, maybe let's say for me, okay, let's say for me, the act of making is often quite it's actually at the moment it's quite slow. As I said, I've been painting the same painting for a few months now, and that's quite rare for me. I'm usually working quicker than that, but doing that is giving me a space that I can continually enter into, and I think that works for the audience on the other side. If you like, for instance, if you have a painting at home that you particularly like, you can enter into it and contemplate it for periods of time, and I think that has that kind of providing maybe providing non-specific moments of contemplation is an important thing. That's a bit of a complicated, but
Yeah, I like
it's
that. Specific moments of contemplation or intermediate, maybe kind of moments or cycles. Um, I think, a lot of artists that I talk to, they say, I don't care about catharsis. My art is not intended to heal anybody's soul. The purpose of my art is my self-expression, is a kind of visual or plastic diary, not with ink, but with paint and any other kind of material. So do you think that your art is more on the kind of personal plane of existence, of self-expression, or just wanting to penetrate the human consciousness with different modes of existence with your art?
well, I think that I'm using it. Like I said, I have a few projects that are like I showed the grandfather passing one, which is quite personal, and I think
Mm,
as I said, I do have those starting points, but where I'm trying to push, where I have this idea, I'm thinking about this subject, how this subject relates to me, but then I do want to find out how is it experienced in the rest of the world as well, because there is an audience that I'm ultimately want to engage with. And I think that if you're engaging with, um, if you're if it's just about me, it's very difficult. It's not impossible, but it makes it a bit more difficult for people
mm.
to engage with it. There are
Yes.
some people that are very good at doing that. I wouldn't say it's completely impossible. Some people are very good at making personal work and engaging with people in certain ways, but usually they are choosing things that make connections very quickly with people, or make strong connections with people.
Yes.
And I think that I'm wanting to make connections with people by using end up using symbolism that relates to uh, actually, yeah, it usually relates to different stories and things within the community. But I'm always trying to play a kind of play, maybe not the right word, but yeah, it's kind of like a game of where something that we see in the normal world looks like something, but it isn't that. It looks like it could be an abandoned building, but it isn't an abandoned building. So,
Yeah.
what
Yes.
I'm always it kind of so it still I'm always trying to get people to think about something, but it's not. It's there is this. Yeah, so I quite like the idea of abstraction. Like I'm interested in abstraction, but I quite like. But I always found that when I have something quite specific that I'm building, even though I will have research to that point, when I make something with a specific reference, people tend to relate to it a lot better than when it's just there's no, I just kind of completely
Yes.
disguise it. When I
Yes.
completely disguise it, I've done it a few times where the references were completely disguised, and it was very difficult for people to relate to. And I think it's much more when people can get some sense of what's happening. It's much I get more pleasure out of it because I feel I'm making connections. So I guess that, yeah, it's not even if I'm working from a personal thing, because the personal things, we all have personal things, and often they are, the things, the significant events of our life are often not necessarily happen in a similar way, but the outcome is often similar, or yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah,
Yes.
but yeah, but it's like so it's, yeah, you're connecting things, and I think you can. I think there's a longer journey in trying to connect with people and finding a place to make links with people than there is in just keeping it to in your own symbolism,
Yeah.
because essentially your own symbolism isn't really your own symbolism. So
Yes.
kind of, yeah, it's kind of something that you've learned, and uh,
Mm.
has been, yes, there's some things that seem like they're
Yeah.
completely
Yeah,
yours,
it comes back
maybe.
to the Ludovico kind of method of
Yeah,
learning. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's essentially what the kind of formal education system is trying to pump. Those
yeah, it
kinds
is,
of
it is.
people like Alex from Clockwork Orange. Yeah,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, yeah. But I think that they do. Yeah, the system wants to pump that. Do you believe it or not?
I believe they want everybody to undergo what Alex has undergone from the
Yeah,
Ludovico method, which is a great reference to Michelangelo, because
yeah,
of his names, of his long kind of series of names, one of those names are Ludovico, which is the name of his father. Yeah,
yeah,
or and it's simply a brilliant kind of work of art, Clockwork Orange, because it
yeah,
centers around the idea that a metaphor can be as wild and as free in a kind of dystopian world that, the Dionysian can be modernized. There will be a mode of Dionysm, shall we say, in this modern kind of era, and it
mm,
is very wild and free. The kind of chariot, the kind of I don't know what is a Corvette or no a DeLorean, the
okay,
DeLorean
yeah,
car from the movie, at least, the Clockwork Orange. It's like the chariot of Dionysus carried away by tigers or cheetahs or whatever. It's the kind of unrestrained kind
mm,
of metaphor, the metaphor that takes shape into
yeah,
life, the kind of the what an artist should strive to be without losing his last kind of um, grains of sanity, shall we say, the grains of sanity. So
Yeah, yeah,
sands, the grains in his mind.
yes, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So what do you think is a kind of a healthy, empowering, engulfing, all encompassing, all those kinds of tag words, metaphor for art that reality should mimic?
That reality should mimic.
Yes.
I guess
The-
that it should be that lots of people are approaching the world at the moment in black and white, like as in this is right, this is wrong, kind of thinking, and I think that art really gives you a space in terms of certainly in terms of making, and I think in terms of viewing for other interpretations, or for what you do isn't necessarily right, it is just something, and I
Mhm.
think that if you can keep it allows an open-mindedness, or it allows for an open-minded interpretation
Yes.
and open-minded thinking in the creation. So if there's anything, I think that if there's one thing, especially at this time, that we could help with, art could help people with, is to be more open-minded sometimes, and to allow, because there's a lot of cutting off at the moment. If someone says
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
they are right, and that's it, and I think that that's, and even there's a lot of things, especially in, for instance, the British press, that if somebody is speaking about something, some kind of social issue, they're somehow wrong, they shouldn't speak about it. It's kind of, it's a bit, I think there should be more open-mindedness, more discussion, and hopefully, like the way in art school people talk, we present something, we talk about it, and if it's a sensible kind of situation, there's no argument necessarily, or there's debate, but it isn't argument. It's not angry argument, it's or fighting argument.
Yes.
It's actual
Yes. But
argumentation.
if you dig just under the surface, like
Yeah,
chaos will ensue immediately.
yeah.
Yes.
I think it will. But I also think that maybe if people, well, it involves some idea of critical thinking, I guess, and that people should be encouraged towards critical thinking more, and not just accepting the first thing that comes is said to them. And I think that art is essentially, if you're going through it, you shouldn't be just focusing only on that first thing that comes to you.
Mm.
And I say that, but some people are very good at doing that and exploring that first thing that comes to them. There are some artists that rarely explore beyond their own vocabulary, and they do it very well. But maybe there's already open meaning. They're a more advanced stage already than some others. Maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
Well, this has been a truly great conversation, and I hope to talk with you again if you're willing.
Yes. Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you very much for
Thank you so
spending the
much,
time.
Sam.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been Sam Stoker, and in conversation in FOF, the Scribe podcast. And I want to thank you everybody for watching. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.